This episode of Arrays of Living discusses bridging perceived differences. Many in our society cry out differences to support divisive laws, behavior, and biases. What I have found over the years is that this thinking is quite frankly a lie, a farce, a marred reality in which the untruth seems to support hidden agendas. If we as a society cannot get past this type of thinking, we are doomed in achieving equity and inclusion, and we fail to understand where diversity truly applies. The first universal law is that of oneness, more precisely, divine oneness, which claims that we are all interconnected. And this interconnectedness is not confined to just humans. This law teaches that everything is unseeingly connected. Humans, animals, nature, the cosmos, all connected. Imagine that greater than our senses is the concept that every action taken, thought, and event is in some way connected to any and everything else. Ascending your mind, and that's really what it's about. It's about really ascending your mind to this awareness and acceptance that we are a massively collective of one. And isn't that profound? It's profound. I'm thinking of the Star Trek Borg storyline. You remember the Borg? It was like a square and it moved about the galaxy, and it was a collective of people all connected with one consciousness. I'm thinking of that. And what it really means is that hurting you is hurting me and hurting everyone and everything in the universe. Wow! My mind is blown. Like, just stop for a minute and think about that. It's not about even if it's true or it's not true or, just think about the concept for a minute. That is the case. Does it spark any kind of incentive in us to change something about us? Mainly our mindset, our thinking, right? With this frame of mind, my modus operandi to lead with love becomes rather easy to adopt and live by. Lead with love, my favorite 3 words. Love, understanding, and compassion becomes a daily intent. When you lead with love, that happens. You go out of your house with the intent of that, and you're a different person. You're thinking differently. You're acting differently. You're responding differently. You're interacting differently when you go out with the intention to lead with love. When that intention to lead with love is backed with the concept of divine oneness, with the concept that we're all connected. Living this way has been a game changer for me. Being on the receiving end of the difference perception, I already knew the narrowness of that thinking. I think that's a fundamental difference between being a person of color and being something else, because we are being conditioned that going forward in the world, we're faced with preconceptions of who we are, what we're all about, what we're capable of, all those sort of things. So we already know, at least I am telling you, I already knew the narrowness of the thinking. And to come to the point of thinking of oneness and leading with love changes things fundamentally. At least I believe it does. I'm interested to know if you believe it does. The world certainly saw the danger of a superiority complex directed towards perceived inferiority, fueled by authoritative empowerment. We saw that. We witnessed that, and we were hurt by it. There was a global sense of hurt, of rage, of protest, of pushback at that. I, of course, am speaking of George Floyd. And even with that brief flashback, I have to just as quickly move on because the memory is so painful and sad. And the painfulness and sadness is what, I will repeat it again, is the danger of a superiority complex directed towards perceived inferiority fueled by authoritative empowerment. So how do we bridge the generalized falsehood of significant differences to such an extent that negative repercussions potentially result in the lives of others? How do we bridge that? Well, here are my thoughts. I am. I will repeat that again. I am. Those are the two key words for affirmations. However, while I acclaim affirmations, I do see these words as even more empowering and have an even greater significance. Let me tell you how. They are bridging words. And they're words that can close perceived gaps of differences. How many times are we asked about ourselves? I know I get asked that often, especially in the world of social media and being a content creator and influencer and being out there with my message. I get asked that often. What are you all about? And then there is the profound interview question. Tell me about yourself. We've all been in interviews, right? Remember that question? Tell me about yourself. When you were younger, you kind of fumbled. Like you were like, I don't know. And you didn't know what to tell and what not to tell and so on and so forth. But that fundamental question, tell me about yourself. And no matter how the question comes, it's all the same theme. Who are you? And I don't mind being asked this question because it opens a dialogue to explore an individual in a way that can reveal similarities and differences. So it's a great question for that. The problem in society is that most often we choose to focus on the differences rather than the things we have in common. Those things we have in common, we take for granted. So the answer to the who are you question many times gets prejudged. Can you imagine? Like, I'm sure you can imagine. And I know, if you are different in some way, you understand what I'm talking about. And when I say different in some way, by societal norms, what society deems to be normal, the answer to the who are you gets prejudged. And then in comes the stereotypes, the biases, and all preconceived thoughts about each other based on a flood of unsubstantiated thoughts, verbal and nonverbal messaging, feelings, and visual stimuli. One of my divintastical guidance states that change in the world starts with us and our thoughts. Remember the divine oneness that calls out that all your thoughts collect in the vast universe to determine the state of the world. That universal law I spoke about earlier, divine oneness, teaches that all our thoughts collect in the vast universe. And as that collective, it actually determines the state of the world. If our thoughts are vengeful, the world becomes vengeful. If our thoughts are caring, the world becomes caring. If our thoughts are for change, the world aims for change. Now, what happens when our thoughts are for love? When our thoughts are to lead with love? When our thoughts are for compassion? When our thoughts are for inclusion? When our thoughts are for something different, then the state of the world moves that way. So the more chaotic the thoughts, the more chaotic the world becomes. The more the thoughts are about love and caring, the more loving and caring the world becomes. Collective consciousness. If you understood this, would you work harder to control the kind of thoughts that go through your mind and outward into that collective space? Would you? Well, I, being an optimist as I am, always being optimistic, I happen to think we would. I happen to think we would take more interest and more care in our mind and seek to get better control over it. I absolutely believe that. Now, here is what was a very real and consistent experience for me growing up. When my friends, family, and I went into stores, we would be followed around because someone answered the I am question for us without even starting a conversation or asking the question of us. We walked into the store, and sure enough, more often than not, there would be this quiet shadow following us around. And in this situation, the answer to the I am that they answered on our behalf was that we were thieves and shoplifters. And let me tell you, these experiences were irritating. And when I was in university, I got to work in a retail store and came to understand the irony of this bias and stereotype. Because the people that were actually followed around predominantly were not the ones shoplifting. They weren't doing anything. The actual shoplifters took advantage of that distraction to shoplift. That was the reality when I worked in a retail store. They took advantage of that stereotype to do what they needed to do or came in to do that wasn't quite as upstanding as people perceived it might be. But the ones that were actually upstanding, that were followed around, keeping the eyes of the store person off of the others, were upstanding. And don't get me, this is not 100% perfection, but that was what I found working in retail. I used to shake my head and say nothing. And at that age, and with the mindset I had at the time, I had found that irony rather fitting. Had the who are you question actually been asked, the stores would have learned that shoplifting was so far removed from the reality of who we were. We were students, Christians, daughters, sons, and I was someone who had promised myself never to do that kind of wrong. It was not in my DNA to do that kind of wrong. There would have to be very unextenuating circumstances to push me into that kind of mindset or thinking or action. So standing behind who you are and what you are about related to your moral compass and values is critical, right? Being able to stand behind that. Here's an example. At one point in my life, I was in Air Cadets, and the day a gun was placed in my hands is the day I quit. Because even as an early teen, I knew upon holding the gun that I was for nonviolence. It wasn't me. And so I knew Air Cadets wasn't for me if this is what they were going to ultimately teach me. That's why I love the line, I'm a lover, not a fighter. Many times in life, you will be prejudged as to who you are, what you're about, what you will do and not do, who you will be and not be, and on and on and on I can go. Over the years, I have found that 9.5 times out of 10, the preconceptions we have are wrong. Even more profound is unfair, unrealistic to apply an entire group of people, or preconceived notions of others based on such things as skin color, gender, you name it, usually miss the mark and lack content, and it lacks context. The context of a person is what we get when we probe and inquire, meaning actually having a conversation to discover what that person is all about in deed and words. So many of us choose to place the burden of our biases and stereotypes on others with little care that it delivers hurt, frustration, irritation, suffering, and anger. Yes, we suffered watching George Floyd suffer. That collective consciousness was at play then. Yes, we were hurt at the assumption of thieving intentions when there was none. Yes, we were frustrated at the subjective nature of the approach and where that subjective choice landed in its execution, being shadowed as we walked and explored the merchandise and products of a store. Yes, we were angry that this type of policing usually ruined our shopping sprees. And we were also angry at the real shoplifters that instilled stores to feel they had to police that way in the first place. The good news is that modern technology improved this practice and equalized the check-in for all consumers. Modern technology is what also allowed George Floyd and his family to get some kind of reprieve from what happened, some kind of outcome that could help in some small way to support the hurt that was there, the devastation that sometimes these preconceptions can deliver. So what is the challenge here? How about pushing the yardstick further by always seeking to bridge the gap of perceived differences? For example, my response to "who are you" would be this. And I must highlight that when I introduce myself, whether I'm on stage, giving a speech at a summit or elsewhere, I do so in this manner because I know we are more alike than you think. And I definitely want you to know that. So here goes. Let me answer the question of myself. Who are you, Jenn? Who are you, audience? Who are you, listeners? Who are you? And here's my response. I am you if you are a mother. I am you if you are a sister. I am you if you are a daughter. I am you if you are a supportive friend. I am you if you are a provider. I am you if you are a nurturer. I am you if you are female. I am you if you are a Nubian, person of color. I am you. I am you if you love the outdoors. I am you if you love art. And while I am you, I am also me. I am a podcast host. I am an author. I'm a speaker. I'm an influencer. I'm a creator. I am a mentor. I am a life advocator and strategist. I am an entrepreneur. I am an accelerator of growth. I am curious about so many things. I am a poet. I am multifaceted. I am complex. I am the original goddess, embracing my wisdom and claiming my throne. I am creator of divintastical living, the how-to for becoming the artisan of one's life. I am many of you, and yet I am me, unique, and I am more than I imagined, and you can be too. I believe in me, and believing in me is believing in you. I am you, and you are me. Divine oneness. We are universally connected. So now I ask you this again. Who are you? And what are your I ams? How will you be the change you wish to see in the world? Because to change the world starts with you. It starts with each of us choosing to lead with love and to manage our mind and the thoughts that go through that mind. Any progress we are seeking depends on each of us, and it requires a conscious choice to focus on how alike we are, embrace our uniqueness, and realize the differences are smaller than we think, can more than likely be insignificant, and adds a richness to what could otherwise be a very boring world. I am Jenn, and if you need help with any of this thinking, with any of what I've spoken about today, reach out using the links in the description. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to this episode of Arrays of Living. And please be sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You will also find in the description below my email address should you want to reach out, and I am happy if you do. And just to be sure, it's jen@youareworthmore.co, and worth more you definitely are. And lastly, also see the link that will allow you to schedule a meet and greet with me. And that's an opportunity for me to meet you and you to meet me and for us to have a chat. And that would be wonderful and welcoming. So please hit the link and let's set up a meet and greet.